What is going on? My name is Marty, and welcome back to another video. Since completing the Pokédex for both Scarlet and Violet, and completing the DLC, I haven't had much incentive to keep playing either of the games except for events like Terra Raids or special mass outbreaks. I was also wanting to do some kind of challenge run before the next Pokémon game comes out. Therefore I wanted to set myself a challenge that I hadn't done before, to obtain a different Pokémon with every mark there is in Scarlet and Violet. There will be some rules and restrictions in place to make this challenge more on the difficult side, which I will explain, but before I do, let's talk about marks. No, not those. We are talking about the feature that returned from Pokémon Sword and Shield. Marks are similar to ribbons in that they can be equipped to various Pokémon to show a unique achievement that Pokémon may have earned in the current game it's in, or in a previous game that's been traded up through the generations. While most of the marks return from Sword and Shield, in total there are 49 marks that can be earned in Scarlet and Violet. Some of these are guaranteed to be given to a Pokémon, such as having high friendship or catching a former Titan Pokémon. However, most of the marks are awarded under certain circumstances, or have only a random chance of appearing. These can range from 1 in 25 to 1 in 1000. It's not exactly as difficult as perhaps encountering a full odds shiny in the wild, and similar to shiny hunting, we can reduce those chances significantly. The first method that can help us is with sandwiches. Depending on the type of sandwich we can make, they can provide up to 3 different effects ranging from level 1 to level 3, and these effects last for 30 minutes. One of the effects we would be most interested in is the tidal power. For every level of tidal power, we add 1 extra roll to the odds of the mark we would be looking for. So if the base odds for one of the marks is 1 in 100, a tidal power level 1 would add 1 to the odds, giving us 2 in 100 chance, or 1 in 50. A level 2 sandwich would give us 3 in 100, and level 3, 4 in 100. The second method comes with the addition of the DLC for Scarlet and Violet. If you talk to Cyrano after completing the Blueberry Pokédex, you can receive the Mark Charm, which makes the odds of Pokémon having a mark more likely. This charm adds 2 extra rolls to the overall odds of receiving a Pokémon with a mark. The good thing is that these 2 bonuses can stack, which means we can receive at most a total of 6 rolls for a Pokémon to have a mark. Except we won't. Because of the nature of this challenge, it won't be possible for us to complete the Blueberry Pokédex, and therefore unable to obtain the Mark Charm, which means we will be heavily reliant on the use of sandwiches. The third and final method comes in the form of a useful feature within the DLC. By completing quests in the Blueberry Academy, you can earn Blueberry points and purchase various upgrades and cosmetics. One of these is an upgrade to your ability to lock on to Pokémon. With this, you can tell the gender, the size, and whether it has a mark or not. There's no way of knowing what the mark is until that Pokémon is caught, but it is a very useful feature, although not available to the player for a long time of regular playthrough. And though it doesn't have an effect on increasing the odds of marked Pokémon appearing, it will save us a lot of time instead of catching everything we see. So how is this going to be a challenge? I could just load up a complete save file of Pokemon Scarlet, for example, and just catch any Pokemon I can tell that have a mark. But instead, I will start a new save file from the very beginning and see how long it would take to obtain each mark on a unique Pokemon. I'll also have random generators set up for each of the marks to give us a random Pokemon each time. Once I have spun the wheel for a mark, that Pokemon's name, as well as its evolution line and any regional variants, are taken out any other future wheel spins. Therefore, we'll have a different Pokemon for each mark each time. So let's go over the rules. I will be playing on a single copy of Pokemon Scarlet, and I'll be starting a fresh save file. Any of the Pokemon we catch with the designated marks are the only ones I can use for the playthrough of the game, meaning I can freely catch as many of the desired Pokemon until we've acquired the correct mark. The only exception to these are mandatory requirements in order to progress the story. If I catch a Pokemon with the required mark and it can evolve, I can choose to do so. For example, if I'm looking to catch a Pikachu with an angry mark and we get it, I can choose to evolve it during my playthrough should I wish to do so. If however I'm looking for a Raichu with an angry mark, I can't just catch the Pikachu and evolve it. The Raichu would need to have the angry mark whenever we catch it. As I've been typing the script out, I'm pretty sure that I've thought of everything and made all of the appropriate preparations in terms of finding out what Pokemon can and can't be obtained for each mark, and also when to access areas of the game. However, I can only properly work out an optimal path once I know what the Pokemon are that I need to catch. So let's find out what those Pokemon are going to be. Each mark will have its own list of Pokemon, and I'll be spinning a random wheel in order to find out what that will be. Some marks can only be caught by certain Pokemon because of their location, so we will prioritise generating those first. Because I'm doing this challenge on Pokemon Scarlet, we'll be removing any Violet exclusives from the challenge. First off, the Titan Pokemon mark. This is a new mark that's been introduced to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and there are only 5 Pokemon in the game that can have it. We should prioritise this one first because we know that Pokemon will have the mark whenever we catch it. The only downside is depending on which one we get, we may have to progress further in the story to get to that Pokemon in the first place. Next are some of the weather marks. In order we have the sandstorm, misty, blizzard and snowy marks. These are some of the ones that I wasn't too confident on what exactly could and couldn't spawn for each of these, so I just pulled the information provided from Bulbapedia. There are a few marks that involve meeting requirements after having caught the Pokemon and that being in your party. This being the Item Finder mark, the Gourmand mark, and the Partner mark. The Item Finder mark is awarded randomly after a Pokemon picks items off the ground in the Let's Go mode with a 1 in 100 chance. The Gourmand mark has a 3 in 101 chance and is given randomly after having meets with the Pokemon in your party. And the Partner mark, which is randomly given to one of your Pokemon when their friendship level is high, and it has a 1 in 100 chance of appearing for every 10,000 steps in Let's Go mode. We have 4 different marks for the different times of the day: the morning, middle of the day, evening, and nighttime. There's still some other weather dependent marks to look out for, such as the overcast, rainy, and stormy weather. There is an unusual mark called the Destiny mark, and this is available randomly on wild Pokemon if it's our birthday. Without worrying about having to play on when my birthday is or changing the date on the Nintendo Switch, we can talk to any of the nurses at the Pokemon Center to confirm what our birthday is. For the Jumbo and Mini mark, we get these by talking to an NPC in Mesagoza. Each Pokemon is coded with a value from 0 to 255 that represents the size of the Pokemon, 0 being the smallest and 255 being the biggest. For the remaining marks, the description is that they all have a small chance of appearing. As any of the Pokemon in the wild could have any of the 30 remaining marks, instead of assigning each mark to a Pokemon, we'll just spin the wheel and whatever Pokemon that comes out, we have to get any of the marks that match with it. So if we end up getting a Pikachu, it can have any of the following marks. But once we've caught a Pikachu with one of the marks in this list, that mark is then removed from the list. This means as more and more are scored off, finding the remaining marks will get more difficult. While most of these marks have a 1 in 100 chance of appearing, the uncommon mark actually has a 1 in 50 chance, and the rare mark, being the rarest of them all, has a 1 in 1000 chance of appearing. I dubbed this list of 30 marks the Bingo marks.
3, 2, 1, go!
Now that we have all of the information we need, let's get started. We start the game going through all of the dialogue and cutscenes, and when it came to picking a starter, it didn't really matter which one I picked, so I went for my favourite. A little while later, after some boring lessons at school, we were finally at the point where Director Clavel sets out the task of the Great Treasure Hunt, and we can now freely travel the Paldea region. It's at this point we're invited to travel to the Kitakami region, as we also have access to the DLC. We then had to prioritise what Pokemon we were going to catch first and help set us on our way. I first started by looking at the 3 Pokemon with the marks that we can earn, rather than hoping they have a particular mark already on them. This means that we can catch the first one of those Pokemon and work towards achieving that mark. This being Turtwig for the Partner mark, Hydrapple with the Item Finder mark, and Umbreon with the Gourmand mark. In order to obtain Turtwig, I need to have completed the main story in Paldea, complete part 1 of the DLC in Kitakami, and make an upgrade in the League Club Room, which means we won't be getting this one for some time. I started by working towards getting the Gourmand mark for Umbreon, and while it can be found fairly easy within Paldea, I was wanting to have as many Pokemon as I can for a bit of variety, particularly in the beginning, and not just to have one Pokemon that's completely overleveled. Also, not having any gym badges at this point kind of limits what I can catch. I decided to catch an Eevee and work on increasing its happiness. For this challenge I wanted to acquire the Umbreon before it earned the Gourmand mark. I also put my starter in the boxes, so Eevee was the only Pokemon on my team to start my journey. After doing some exploring, I went back to the academy to talk to Briar, and this starts our quest of going to Kitakami and also working on the DLC story. The neat part is that we can access Kitakami very early in the story, and also the Pokemon's levels are based on whether or not we've completed the main story. Because we've just started the game, wild Pokemon trainers' levels are going to be quite low. Not long after landing, I immediately find my first Cutiefly. It however did not possess a mark, but I was playing the long game. See, as I've mentioned before about increasing our chances of encountering Pokemon with marks, when we get to the Blueberry Academy and get to upgrade our lock-on ability to see if wild Pokemon have marks, this only works on Pokemon that we've already caught. If we haven't caught that Pokemon before, they just show up as question mark. So I made sure to catch at least one of whatever it is I needed to acquire for later on in the challenge. After some more DLC story progression, I encountered my next Pokemon, Applin. This was available as a Wild Terra Pokemon at level 15, higher than my only other Pokemon, so this was a great addition to my team. Going to the shack in the bottom right of Kitakami, you can purchase syrupy apples for $500, which is used to evolve Applin into Diplin. For me to then get Hydrapple, it can only evolve when it has learned the TM Dragon Shear, and the only way you can get it is first beating Drayton in the Blueberry Academy, and you can only battle Drayton with Pokemon you've caught yourself within the terrarium. Turtwig was going to be a bit of a wait, but Hydrapple even more so. Not long after I went back to the academy in Paldea, and to my surprise I talked to Cyrano, who escorts us to the Blueberry Academy. I initially thought I had to have completed the story in DLC Part 1 before even setting foot in the Blueberry Academy. This means that I'll be able to make a good chunk of progress once I beat Lacey in this 2v2 battle and... oh. Well, it didn't matter how the battle plays out, we can still progress and access the terrarium. We can find any of the Pokemon we need and... oh. So the DLC Part 2 is definitely for those who've made progress in the story or Pokemon are of a certain level. We finished the day off by taking on the lowest level Titan, Clough. This meant that we now have the ability to sprint while on Koraidon. For now, I think we've done the most tedious part of our challenge so far. Day 2 started off with making some progress in the story. We took on the first gym leader and made some DLC 1 progress. After about an hour, I noticed it was night time and decided to try and improve Eevee's happiness. So I fed it some XP candy until it leveled up and it evolved into Umbreon. This meant that now we can freely use or make sandwiches in order for Umbreon to try and get the Gourmand mark. I don't recall exactly how many meals I had whenever Umbreon got the mark, I just knew in time that it would eventually get it if it stays my team long enough. I spent some more time exploring, catching Pokemon that I know I'll need, and unlocking Pokemon centers for us to fast travel to. I then ended up at the Bombardier Titan, and even though my Pokemon failed in a battle, Arvin was able to come in clutch and get the win for us. With that Titan taken care of, we can now travel across water. At this stage, I was really starting to struggle with just 2 Pokemon in my team, so I knew I needed to get a third. I made my way to the right hand side of Paldea to take on the Titan Earthworm, and with the third Titan down, we're now able to jump a lot higher. But we still had to catch the Earthworm. After a struggle, we were able to finally catch it, and Earthworm becomes officially our first Pokemon with a mark. Feeling stronger with a team of 3, I decided to take on the Grass Gym Leader. With each Gym Leader we take on, the level cap at which Pokemon listen to us increases, which means some Pokemon will be easier to catch and obey us. We then headed back to Kitakami to take on some more story, encountered a weird looking kid, and put Kieran in his place and eventually set free the loyal trio. We battled the trio in a similar way of taking on the Titan Pokemon, with Carmine helping us take them on. We end the day by doing the outdoor class task with Lacey. In order to progress the story, I have to catch an Alolan Pokemon. Unfortunately, none of the Pokemon that I'm required to catch for the challenge were Alolan forms, so I just caught the first one that I could. After returning, we're then informed that we now have access to Blueberry Quests, or BBQs. We also get a notification that we cannot progress the story any further until the story in Paldea and Kitakami is complete. But we can now earn Blueberry points, which will be very important for us going forward. Day 4 is where I first felt like I was able to make a dent in the challenge, as I ended up catching 5 Pokemon with marks that I needed. My thought process was that if I can focus on the Pokemon that are available easily and at a low level, that I can then add them to my team, progress the story more effectively, and then work on catching everything else I need. But also my main priority was getting to acquire the lock-on upgrade for detecting Pokemon that have marks. I started by earning enough BP to be able to buy the Academy Shake from the cafeteria. For 30 minutes, this meal gives us a level 1 tidal power, which increases the chances of getting Pokemon with marks. I then started focusing on the pasture fields near Cortondo and catching as many Smoliv and Combi as I possibly could. I let the time run out on my meal and checked my catches, and there it was, our first wild marked encounter with a crafty Smoliv. I went back to the academy for another shake and headed to Kitakami to catch as many Cutiefly and Ralts as I could. Similarly, I let the meal power end and I checked my boxes and seen that we now have an uncommon Cutiefly. Confident that the meals were working as intended, I went back for a third time and went to Kitakami as they had both Hoot Hoot and Ralts during the nighttime. After catching some of each, I checked my storage and found I had an excited Hoot Hoot. I now finally have a team of 6 Pokemon. After catching some more Ralts, Hoot Hoot evolved into Noctowl and Smoliv evolved into Dolliv. I got myself another shake and went to Kitakami to start hunting for the smallest Ekans possible, during which time Cutiefly evolved into Ribombee. I had caught about 40 plus Ekans at this point, and while I had a meal power active when I was catching them, none of the powers were affecting the size of the Pokemon, so the sizes of each Pokemon ranged from 0 to 255. I then took my bunch of Ekans to Mesagoza and asked the lady to measure them, and there it was, the mini Ekans. Lastly, I thought with my somewhat improved team that I could start taking on the Team Star bases, and on the way to one I found a couple of Mudbray, and I just thought that I would catch them just to see. I went into the Star base and defeated the first one. It would only be the next day that I caught a Tyrogue hoping it would have a mark, only to forget the Mudbray that I caught the day before. The level 16 Mudbray that I caught out of the 2 the day before had the 1 in 1000 rare mark. As for the next day, not a lot happened apart from taking on another 2 Team Star bases as well as the 3rd and 4th gym leader. Day 6 was mostly the same for the first part. I made a bit more story progression and defeated the 5th gym leader. Dolliv evolved into Arboliva, and then I discovered there was a mass outbreak in Paldea of Haunter. Knowing this was one of the Pokemon I needed to get a mark, I tried to be tactical about things. I saved my game and went to the cafeteria to get the meal power for the marks and went back to Paldea to catch as many Haunter as I could. If by the time the meal power ends and I didn't catch anything I need, I would just reset the game. Despite being an outbreak, Haunter still only appears at nighttime, so I have a limited time to get to work. If my meal power is active but it's now become the daytime and the Haunter don't spawn, I would make use of my time and try and catch something else. I was also trying to work on catching the largest Quagsire. They can spawn in the wild in Kitakami with a wild Terra one in a set location. Fixed Terra Pokemon have a guaranteed size value from 200 to 255, so I caught one every time that there was one there. On my way to that one, I did see this.
Wow. Aw, he's so pink.
Oh, it's a crit catch.
Yes. I was wondering when I was going to get a shiny.
It, however, was not the largest one, but it was still cool nonetheless. There was also a mass outbreak of Electric in Kitakami, so I went there when it was daytime in Paldea to try and catch a marked one. This Pokemon was one of the hardest ones to get a mark on. I caught so many before I got the one I needed, but I didn't get it today. I spent about an hour and a half catching the stupid eel before giving up and going back to trying to catch Haunter. With 2 Pokemon that I needed, both in mass outbreaks, I was determined to get at least one with a mark. After the 4th Haunter caught this time round, we found an absent-minded Haunter. I took a break and came back later on that day, but I was still unsuccessful in my attempts to catch an Electric with a mark. Catching lots of them, however, did help massively with increasing the levels of all my Pokemon. I had to stop recording, but the next day we continued where we left off and took on the 6th gym leader. I also kinda forgot about the Titan quest, so I went back to the desert and steamrolled through the Titan Pokemon, which allowed us the ability to glide. I then went straight to the 5th and final Titan to get our last movement upgrade. I learned that there was also an outbreak of Shinx and Clefairy both in Kitakami, so I went to the cafeteria to get a shake and got to work on catching Clefairy. One unsuccessful meal later and I went to Paldea, took on another Team Star boss and tried again, this time with Shinx. I needed Shinx to have the lunchtime mark, so it could only be caught during a certain time of the day. I wasn't sure about the exact timing, so I just made sure to catch Shinx after the morning time. After about 35 were caught in the outbreak, we get our lunchtime mark Shinx. After a couple more Academy shakes, I tried again with the Clefairy, and eventually after catching quite a lot, we get the upbeat mark Clefairy. Day 8 was one of those uneventful days in terms of catching Pokemon, but I moved on to the 7th and 8th gym leader. I channeled my inner Max Verstappen in the time trial with a time of exactly 38 seconds, but with our Pokemon at considerably higher levels now, it wasn't much of a challenge. I started the next day with taking on the 5th and final Team Star boss, and I was determined to complete the main story of Paldea. Once again, I was at a much higher level, so it made this quite easy. Having defeated all 5 Titans, we had to then meet Arvin at the lighthouse, defeat him in battle, and that completes one of the 3 main story quests. quests. We then wait till nighttime to go to Paldea Academy to take on Director Clavel and then Penny, who was behind Operation Starfall all along. After one of the best pieces of music plays, we defeat Penny and eventually complete the Operation Starfall quest. The last bit of story to work on was the Elite Four. I feel like my level difference helped a bit, but I wasn't breezing through it. After all four were defeated and eventually the champion Gita, we then had one final battle with Nomona in Mesagoza. Having completed all three of the main quests, it was then time to start the fourth and final quest, The Way Home. I only started this quest on day 9, but on day 10 we traverse deeper into Area 0, take on AI Sada and destroy the time machine. After that part of the story has been complete, we then end up back in our dorm. We get a phone call from Carmine asking to meet up at the Blueberry Academy. As we've now completed the main requirements of story in Paldea, we're now free to progress the story in DLC 2. After a battle with Carmine and talking to Drayton, we now have access to the League Club Room and purchase upgrades. There are 3 that we are mainly interested in. The lock-on upgrade for 200 points, and boosting the biome diversity expansion in both the canyon and coastal biome for 3000 points each. I got the lock-on upgrade, which means now I can see if Pokemon have a mark before capturing them. We've also been given the task of defeating the BB Elite Four. Drayton is the only one that we're interested in the most. In order to defeat Drayton, we need to have a team of Pokemon that we have caught solely within the Blueberry Academy. This meant that I had to get to work catching the Pokemon that can be found here in the hopes of putting together a team. And out of all the Pokemon I needed to catch for the challenge, 19 of them can be found within the Academy. I didn't feel comfortable with just getting 1 or 2. I wanted to have a full team of 5 or 6 just to be safe. So I spent the majority of that day catching the Pokemon that I hadn't caught previously or seeing if they had a mark. Today, however, I was unsuccessful in getting anything I needed, but my main priority was also saving up as many points as I could. Day 11 started off with the best way possible. I began each day with checking what mass outbreaks are occurring and checking those that also have question marks. I saw there was one in the polar biome and headed to one of the nearest fast travel locations and came across a Magnemite with a mark. I caught it just to see what if, and it turned out it was an intellectual Magnemite. I had travelled to Kitakami for a moment to capture any large Quagsire, and in doing so Magnemite leveled up and evolved into Magneton. I then used a Thunderstone to evolve it again into Magnezone. A little bit of exploring in the terrarium, I came across a marked for Farigiraf, which turned out to have a Peeved mark, doubling our team for battling Drayton. Day 12 was more of the same, exploring within the terrarium, trying to get points as quick as I could, and also checking as many Pokemon that I needed, when I spotted there was a mass outbreak of Tyrogue which I needed to catch around the dawn time. I started working through the outbreak just as the sun was rising and catching any Tyrogue with marks that I could. After checking the second Tyrogue in the outbreak, we had found the dawn mark Tyrogue. Sticking with the themed marks of times of the day, I had noticed there was a mass outbreak of Stonejourner in Paldea, this one requiring a dusk mark. Each day and night cycle within Scarlet Violet lasts about 72 minutes in real time, and about 4 of those minutes are technically part of the evening time, so it's a very short time frame to act. However, I knew that if Pokemon spawned and potentially had the dusk mark, as long as they stayed on screen and didn't despawn, even if it becomes nighttime, I can take my time and catch those with the marks. After the third Stonejourner, we got the dusk mark. As it was now nighttime, I went to the top of Paldea to find Slacking with the sleepy time mark. A bit of back and forth, we eventually got it after only the second one. To round off the day, I got another Academy Shake, and after finding several Duraludon, I managed to catch a very intense looking one. Day 13 started with me saving up some more BP and eventually having enough to expand the canyon biome. This allowed me to encounter Pokemon such as starters from other regions like Litten and Tepig, but in this case we're looking to catch my favourite Pokemon, Turtwig. This is also the last of the Pokemon I need to catch where the mark has to be earned. In Turtwig's case, this is the partner mark. So I made sure to catch the boy in a luxury ball to help with the friendship. The main problem with this Pokemon, however, is that I need to make sure it doesn't evolve prior to earning the partner mark. The next day I spent the longest amount of time playing in one session, and it paid off. I bought some items such as a Soothe Bell for Turtwig's happiness. After some exploring and catching some more marked Pokemon, and eventually, Tyrogue evolved into Hitmonchan. I chose this one out of the 3 as it had more move variety. Ralts evolved into Kirlia. Wait, I didn't mention that I caught a Ralts. Let me explain. One of the marks in the challenge is the Mightiest mark, given to a specific Pokemon in timed exclusive Terra raids, and they can only be done by connecting to online. However, I am doing this challenge on an alternate account and I didn't want to pay for another Nintendo Online membership, so I figured if I at least had a Pokemon I caught as part of the challenge prepared for one of the current Terra raids, I would then transfer that Pokemon to my main account and complete the Terra raid then. At the time of recording, Infernape was appearing in online Terra raids with the Mightiest mark. It was a relatively easy raid to do, and out of the Pokemon that I had to catch, a Ralts that fully evolved into Gallade and with the right moves and stats would be the best counter for it. hence why I bought the metronome and other stat items in this save file and then piggyback off my main save file, acting as if I was doing the raid on the secondary account. The problem is, the routes that I had previously caught with a mark was a female, and they can't evolve into Gallade. And I didn't realise. So the hunt was on to find a male Ralts with a mark that I hadn't got yet. 6 Ralts caught later, I caught one with the Vigor mark. I then bought some more stat increasing items and maxed out its attack and HP stats, so now it's fully EV trained, as well as getting some bottle caps to max out its IVs. Apart from evolving and being level 100, this Pokemon was ready to raid. I went back to the academy and bought a meal to catch some more Pokemon. When I checked, Umbreon had finally achieved the Gourmand mark. Not even 3 minutes later, I caught an Excadrill with the Angry mark. I think this is the game feeling sorry for my mistake with the Ralts. Some more battling and catching, Tyrogue evolved again, this time for good. I then let Ralts evolve into Kirlia and use a Dawnstone to evolve into Gallade. And we picked up the Metal Alloy for evolving Duraludon. By this point I'd saved up enough points to get the last Blueberry upgrade I needed, which was the Coastal Biome upgrade. I taught Gallade some new moves that I thought it would need for the Infernape raid, such as Drain Punch and Sword Stance being the most important. While in the academy, I noticed it started raining and Scyther could spawn in the Canyon biome. I've also noticed that the bad weather effects such as rain, sandstorms, blizzards, they only seem to last for a few minutes at a time. So when the weather changes, it was always a rush to see if I can find and catch the Pokemon I need with the right weather conditions. In this case, the first Scyther I came across at the time had the Rainy mark. While I wouldn't be able to evolve it, I thought it would be helpful in terms of weakening Pokemon in battle for capturing. Scyther can learn the move False Swipe via TM, but to unlock it you have to complete Jacques' classes, and he gives you the TM if you've registered 30 species in your Pokedex. I decided to then close the day by transferring Gallade over to my main save file to complete the Infernape Terror raid. This raid was one of the easiest ones that I have ever done. With Metronome and Drain Punch, you can just keep spamming the move until you win. I was so grateful for being able to do such a straightforward Terror raid and not having to think too much about what Pokemon I had that was suitable for each Mighty Mark Pokemon. I then took the Gallade and Infernape back over to my second save file, which brings the total number of marked Pokemon to 20. Oh, I need to lie down. The next day, I started by checking what outbreaks there are and noticed that there was a Flygon outbreak. I immediately bought a shake and went to catching, and after only a few, I found a flustered Flygon. Wanting to take advantage of my current meal power, I headed for Castle Royale Lake to see what the weather was like, and noticed something a little strange.
Is that shiny? Holy shit! That's insane. I never even realized. I have to watch that back and see how long it's just been sitting there and I didn't even realize. It's an alright shiny, I guess.
It took me so long to realise, and I thought it was the shadow of the tree, but it's a shiny Tropius. I was very happy even though it doesn't help us with our challenge. I had been hanging around the lake for a while as there was also a Dratini outbreak and I'd been hoping the weather would turn stormy. However, I had gone up to Glaciado Mountain to keep an eye out for a snow or blizzard. Being right next to the lake, I could easily glide down to Dratini if the weather turned for me. When suddenly...
Oh, no way. No way. There's no way. Two shinies in one day, and I'm not even looking for the shinies. That's the annoying thing.
Another full odds Pokemon, shiny Q-Font almost exactly 1 hour after the shiny Tropius. I took this as a sign that if I can encounter full odds shinies in this space of time, then there's hope for me completing this challenge. I noticed there was an outbreak of Noibat, so I made that my target for the day. After getting a shake, we caught a joyful mark Noibat after just the 5th one. I really tried to be as efficient as possible when making the most of the time when there was a meal active. I would have a couple of secondary locations to go to just in case I get lucky and get the desired mark early in the meal power. So I headed to the sea off to the east coast and started catching any Finizen and Marini that I could. What proved helpful is that one of the Finizen I caught had a cloudy mark, so I went to where Sinistea would spawn in the wild, not far from the ocean, and see if I could find any. And sure enough, the first marked Sinistea I caught had the cloudy mark. After a while, I thought my team of terrarium only Pokemon were high enough level for fighting Drayton. Drayton then gives us the TM for Dragon Cheer, allowing us to finally evolve our Diplin into Hydrapple. Now we can work towards getting the item finder mark. The next day I put Hydrapple first in the party and noticed there was an outbreak of Growlithe in Kitakami, and after catching about a dozen or so during the outbreak, we get a Growlithe with the slump mark. I then thought about trying a different tactic. I decided to try and make type encounter sandwiches instead. My thinking was that if I can't find the Pokemon with the marks, I'll just spawn more of that Pokemon instead. I could also have tried to do level 3 meal powers, but level 3 requires farming for Herb and Mystica, which I thought was too much of a grind when a lot of the Pokemon that I have won't be very useful for fighting in 5 or 6 star raids, and my time could be better spent on catching the Pokemon I need in the first place. With a level 2 sandwich and after only 6 Combi caught, we get the Thorny mark. It's a shame it's a male, therefore it won't be able to evolve, but with 25 Pokemon caught with 25 different marks, we've just passed the halfway point in our challenge. There was also an outbreak of a Spathra in Paldea, so I took to getting another Shake and hunting down one of those for our collection, and after only 4 caught in this outbreak, we get a Humble the Spathra. Day 18 was another successful day right from the start. I had saved halfway up Glaciato Mountain the day before, and when I started the game I noticed it was snowing, so I raced around trying to find gumshoes. When I saw that there was just a singular one spawned surrounded by Yungoos, and it had a mark, it turned out to have the snowy mark that we needed. Just after I went to check on my Pokemon and seen that Hydrapple had also achieved the item finder mark. This might have happened the previous day and I just didn't notice it, but we got it and that's the main thing. I then decided that today was going to be my birthday. 24th of October is now officially my non-official birthday, so make sure you come back to this video every year on the 24th of October to wish me happy birthday. With the date set and the Academy Shake active, I headed for the Golett mass outbreak and see how easy this mark will be. After catching only 5 Golett in the outbreak, we get the Destiny mark. Again, I made use of my meat power time and headed for the waters to try and catch Finizen and Marini, and only the second Marini on this occasion had the prideful mark. About an hour later, hanging around the mountain waiting for a blizzard, I came across this Cryogonal with a mark. I caught that one and it ended up having the kindly mark, wrapping up a very productive day. Day 19 started off with finding out that there was a Torkoal outbreak, so I got a Shake and started catching. After catching the 13th Torkoal, we find one with the Scully mark. I started the next day by resetting the game a few times in order to get a mass outbreak of what we wanted, until we found a mass outbreak of Dunsparce. After 2 Academy Shakes and catching about 28 Dunsparce in the outbreak, we finally catch one with the Rowdy mark. Later on, as I was wandering around the desert...
Wait, is that a shiny?
It so is.
Yeah, buddy.
Sweet. I hadn't personally touched the challenge for quite a while at this stage as I was very busy over the next couple months. The previous date of recording was the 28th of October, now it was the 8th of January, so I had to get back into the swing of things. I had checked the status of my Pokemon and seen that Turtwig now finally had achieved the partner mark. I noticed there was an outbreak of Crocodile in the terrarium, so I got a Shake and started catching, during which Turtwig was then able to evolve into Groudle. After catching the 7th Crocodile in the outbreak, we get the zoned out mark. The next thing I wanted to do was tackle one of the hardest marks to achieve, the Misty mark. The Misty mark only occurs whenever the weather is foggy, and there are a couple of difficulties with this one. Fog only occurs in Kitakami, but it just doesn't occur like thunderstorms all over the region. The fog only spawns when you, the player, are in specific locations around Kitakami. A lot of the times this requires the player to be climbing up walls really high or being at certain altitudes. I really struggled to find more information on this, but the only thing I could find was one page online that I had to translate from Japanese to English. The main part of the article is that some locations are easier to trigger the fog than others, meaning that some Pokemon may be harder to obtain the Misty mark. Thankfully, we had a fairly easy Pokemon to encounter being Rockruff, so I put a level 2 encounter sandwich to spawn more rock types and then set up and took down the picnic table to reset the spawns. I kept climbing up the wall where they can appear in order to spawn the fog in, and after only a couple of Rockruff caught, we finally get the Misty mark. I reset the game a few times until I saw there was an outbreak of Houndour in Kitakami. I got a shake and got straight to catching. After about 15 Houndour caught, we get one with the unsure mark. I spent the rest of the day trying to catch as many large Quagsire and other marked Pokemon, and during which Grotto evolved into Torterra. I spent most of the next day trying to catch Pokemon such as Rotom and Electric with no success, so I thought I would try and go for something a bit easier. I waited about in the Asado Desert until the sandstorm started, and then began to sprint and catch as many of the marked Rufflets as I could. I didn't chance putting on a sandwich in case the sandstorm had ended, so I just acted as fast as I could. After about the second Rufflet caught that day, we find the sandstorm mark. It was at this point that I felt like the success rate of the challenge has already plateaued, and it was only going to get harder from here on in. The next day I started by seeing there was an outbreak of Electric. I saved my game and got a shake to see how I would do today. After one reset and culminating about 30 Electric in this session alone, we finally catch one with the smiley mark. This Pokemon I probably caught about close to 100 alone in my time doing this challenge, so it was a relief not to worry about this one anymore. With only 10 Pokemon left to catch, I was starting to see the end in sight. Having struggled with trying to find the largest Quagsire possible, I saw that this day had a mass outbreak of them in Kitakami. I then made a sandwich that gave level 2 Humongo power for ground types, just to try and force as many large ones to spawn as possible. And this turned out to be a lot of them, so I spent as much of the day catching as many as possible in my time recording. After the sandwich had expired, I got all my Quagsire measured, yet none of them hit the highest mark possible. I repeated this a few times without success, and this day did feel like a disappointment not getting anything towards the challenge. Next day, I started by getting a shake as I noticed there was an outbreak of Sandslash in Kitakami. While the Quagsires weren't doing its thing for me, I knew anytime I had to go to Kitakami, I can just travel to where they spawn and catch any large ones I see. After getting 3 shakes though, and 40 marked Sandslash were caught in the outbreak, we managed to get one with the pumped up mark. I seen there was an outbreak of Finizen, but after a few Academy shakes and catching a couple of boxes worth, I couldn't find any with the missing marks. I spent a couple of hours on it with no success and called it a day. For the remaining days ahead though, I'll only be talking about the days where something of note happened. As the challenge was coming to completion, I knew it was going to be harder to find what I needed, and a lot of days passed where nothing happened. In most cases, I deleted any of the recordings. I started the game by seeing there was an outbreak of Trevenant in Kitakami. Being like most ghost types in this game, they primarily spawn during the nighttime, even if there is a mass outbreak. After getting a shake and catching about 15 or so, it turned to morning and no more were spawning at that time. I made use of my current meat power and checked Mount Glaciado, and as I did, I seen there was a blizzard. So I rushed around, finding as many Cubchoo to catch as I could. The second one I got that day finally had the blizzard mark. When it was nighttime in Kitakami again, I tried to catch some more Trevenant, but sunrise came around once again. During this area's daytime, I decided to try and complete some Terra raids. I hoped that if I had done enough raids, and in particular the higher difficulty ones, I might be rewarded with a Herba Mystica to help with the marks. One of the raids I had done had a couple of spicy Herba Mysticas, and when I make a sandwich with it, I can get a level 3 tidal power. I went back to the outbreak for the third time that day, and after about 30 odd caught in total that day, I managed to get the Trevenant with the Teary mark. The next day had a similar approach. I started the game with an outbreak of Poltergeist in Kitakami. Similar to Haunter and Trevenant, they're more likely to spawn at nighttime. But there was also another problem with catching this Pokemon. The current level of these Poltergeist spawning in the wild means that they know the move Memento, a move that lowers your opponent's stats, but at the cost of knocking itself out. So with the Gallade I had, I taught it moves like Taunt to force it to use attacking moves only, and Thunder Wave to increase the chances of catching. I also relied on stealth and sneaking up and catching them off guard for the most effectiveness. After catching a good number and using a sandwich with the Herba Mystica to increase the spawns, eventually we caught a Poltergeist with the 0 energy mark. Day 30 had started off by noticing that there was once again an outbreak of Finizen, so I saved the game, got to making a level 3 sandwich right next to where the outbreak was, and started catching as many as I could. I caught almost 30 with marks in the outbreak, and a lot of duplicates of ones I previously got, but with the second to last one caught, it had the Ferocious mark, leaving us with only 5 marks left to get.
Okay, I have to start recording right now. I was resetting on the off chance that I got a mass outbreak of something I needed, and I did. And then I was like, I'm not recording just yet. Let's go get a 5-star raid. Let's hope that we get a Herba Mystica. We make our level 3 sandwich, and we get our mark for the Pokemon we need. On my way to find raids, I found a shiny, and it's a shiny I've never had before, and this has completely caught me off guard, and I don't know what's going on today. I freaking shiny Dondozo. I mean, it's not hard to miss. That is a nice... That's a weird looking shiny. I was going to say nice, but it's weird.
I also noticed there was an outbreak of Rotom in the terrarium. This had been a Pokemon that I felt like was one of the ones giving me the most trouble, in terms of encountering so many and then not getting any of the marks that I needed. And today was no different. I had even made a sandwich with the Herb and Mystica to get level 3 title power for ghost types, but despite resetting several times, I could not find any Rotom that had any of the missing marks I needed. I did decide to end the day by travelling to Castle Royal Lake to see what the weather was like, and I came across a Dratini that had the Stormy mark. I was really determined to get the biggest Quagsire today, as I've tried on several occasions to do so without success. Out of the 26 or so I caught during this one particular sandwich, we get the biggest after the 9th one, our Jumbo Mark Quagsire on the 23rd of February. I was very relieved with this, and I decided to take a short break from the challenge. Okay, that might have been too much of a break. There was definitely a couple of days of playing and recording where nothing happens, but this day in particular was amazing in terms of progressing the challenge. I started by seeing that once again there was an outbreak of Rotom in the Blueberry Academy. After making a ghost encounter sandwich, I had no luck, so I moved on to trying to get another one of the last remaining Pokemon I needed. I headed to the other cave area in the terrarium to try and get a Mudkip. This time I set up a level 2 water encounter sandwich. This was another tricky Pokemon to catch, as they currently know the move Endeavour. So every time I would use False Swipe to lower their health to 1 HP, they would immediately return the favour. After catching only about 10 or so from the sandwich, I checked my captures and saw that I caught a Mudkip with the Camnus mark. I was down to 2 Pokemon left to catch, Rotom and Tinkatuff. I then headed towards the northeast of Paldea and made a level 2 fairy encounter sandwich to try and spawn the Tinkatuff. And after only 8 or so caught this time, we get our hands on the charismatic mark Tinkatuff. This left me with the 1 Pokemon and the 1 mark. I needed to find a Rotom with a jittery mark. This Pokemon was one of the hardest to catch for the required mark. I would even go as far as to say that this has been one of the Pokemon that I've caught the most of for this challenge. Probably somewhere between 100 and 150 Rotom. There's only 2 locations that Rotom can spawn, within the Chargestone Cavern in the Blueberry Academy and by the Porto Marinata Lighthouse on the west coast. Depending on the time of day in Paldea would determine where I would go to try and catch the Rotom. Nighttime I would go to the lighthouse, and daytime I would go to the cavern. One time when I was at the lighthouse, I caught a Rotom and went to check it, and I wish I was recording when I got this, just for my reaction alone. I had to rely entirely on saving the video clip on my Switch, but with Rotom caught, I have officially caught every Pokemon with a mark. Wait. While we have technically caught a Pokemon with every mark there is in Scarlet, there are 4 other marks that can be visible on Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet, but obtained in other games. This being the Alpha mark in Legends Arceus, and for Sword and Shield we have the Dry mark, the Curry mark, and the Fishing mark. You may have noticed there was a gap in the number of days on screen with catching the Pokemon in Scarlet. Well, before I was fully finished with catching the marks in Scarlet, I knew that I was planning to play Legends Arceus and Sword or Shield as part of this challenge, and at this stage I was starting to get fed up of playing Scarlet and not making any progress. I thought I could at least get started with the other 2 games. Before I determined what we could catch, I had to rule out what we couldn't catch. Sword and Shield were criticised for not being able to have every Pokemon in existence appear in those games, and Scarlet and Violet is the same. There is a list of 292 unobtainable Pokemon for these games that can't be caught or transferred in from home or from other games. For Legends Arceus, there are 242 Pokemon in the game, and every one of them can appear as an alpha except for legendaries and mythicals, which brings our totals to 224. But considering there are 2 different forms of Sneasel, this list is actually 225. Next we can rule out 54 Pokemon from the unobtainable list, which brings our total now down to 170. Finally, we can remove any Pokemon, their evolution lines and regional variants of Pokemon that we have already caught as part of our Scarlet playthrough, such as Magnemite and Growlithe. This removes 43 from our list, bringing our final total of potential Alpha Pokemon to 127. Within Legends Arceus there are fixed encounters with Alpha Pokemon. Out of the list of 127, 46 of them can be static Alphas, which gives us a 1 in 3 chance. They will always appear in set locations, which can make finding them easier, whereas the rest all have between 0.2 and 2% chance of appearing randomly in the wild. Probopass is a fixed alpha Pokemon, and while that seems good for us, the hard part is going to be getting to it in the first place. Its only location is in the Coronet Highlands, which is the 4th area we visit in the game, and we can only visit each area once we've achieved enough points in our Pokédex to rank up. The easy option is to just play the game normally until we get to the Highlands and catch our Probopass then. However, I don't like making things easy for myself. I tasked myself to try and only catch that Probopass, with 2 exceptions. First, we can use the Pokemon in our playthrough that are required for story progression. The second being, if I come across a shiny, I can catch it and use it as well. I caught a few shinies during my playthrough of Scarlet, and I figured it was a fair reward for the hard work being put into the challenge. Today, we start by playing Legends Arceus. We pick our starter, and then given a tutorial to catch Shinx, Bidoof, and Starly. We are then given the Pokédex, and the real challenge of this game can begin. Earning research points. If you've played this game, you'll know that in order to progress to the next area, we need to earn enough research points to increase our star rank. In this case, we will need to earn enough points to get to the 4th star rank, which is a total of 6,000 research points. But with the 4 Pokemon we have, the maximum we can earn is going to be just over 4,000 points. After some exploring, we earned enough points to earn our first star rank and progress some more story in the first area, which includes defeating the first noble Pokemon, Kleavor. I then completed most of the research tasks that I could with just the 4 Pokemon I had to also progress to star rank 2. I then evolved Starly to Staravia, Shinx to Luxio, Bidoof to Bibarel, and Rowlet to Dartrix. After playing some more of the story, we were then able to defeat the second noble Pokemon, Lilligant, and that ended my first day of Legends Arceus. The next day, I had done some more research tasks of the Pokemon I evolved the day before, and was then able to evolve Dartrix to Decidueye, Staravia to Staraptor, and Luxio to Luxray. I had then made enough points to earn star rank 3 and progressed to the 3rd area of Cobalt Coastlands. And this is where I hit a bit of a roadblock. As part of the story progression, Iscan requires us to use the Dusclops to make bombs for Basque Legion. However, I didn't want to wait for God knows how long until a shiny Dusclops showed up, given how infrequent they can spawn. I decided that this was another mandatory Pokemon to catch in order to progress the story. The plus side is that this is a new Pokemon that gives us access to new research tasks and also evolving into Dusknoir. With the Dusclops caught, we continued on with the story and then defeated the noble Pokemon Arcanine. I continued working on research tasks, then this happened. I don't believe it. That's a shiny. I panicked and almost lost it, but I kept it as a backup to evolve should we need more research points. I then ended the day with having about 1700 research points left to earn before we can finally progress to the last area. Day 34 was dedicated to completing tasks, but day 35 is where I was really starting to doubt the progress. I still had some research tasks left to do, but I was entirely finished with using Dusclops that I could then evolve into Dusknoir. However, it still wasn't going to be enough to get to the Highlands. I needed 6,000 points to get to star rank 4, but I worked out that with the current Pokemon I had, that the maximum I would be able to earn would be close to 5,000, which meant I had to rely on catching another shiny Pokemon, and more preferable, something that I hadn't already caught. So I spent a lot of time going between the different areas, doing laps and finishing off any missing research tasks I had. I finished the day with 4,930 points and needing just over 1,000 to get me through to the last area. I've been doing a bit of grinding. I've been completing most of the tasks that were fairly straightforward to complete. I've completed Dusknoir. Everything else is done except for defeating Dusclops. However, I was debating whether or not to still look for a shiny, I guess. And I was kind of anticipating it would be a shiny of a Pokemon that we've already caught. But I was in the Mirelands, the Crimson Mirelands, the boggy area, and it was foggy for a good 10 minutes. And it didn't lift at all. And then I heard this shiny noise. And I couldn't see what it was, and I was starting to panic. But it's not something that we've caught before. And I have found the shiny, and it's right in front of me. It's a Ghastly. And I am okay with that. The only thing is, I have to be careful not to die here. That's the one. Because there were other things chasing me.
Oh, thank goodness for that. Okay, get out of here before we die.
A shiny Ghastly was perfect, being a 3-stage evolution, having lots of tasks to complete, and it would be more than enough to get the points I needed. I finished the day by completing all of Ghastly's possible tasks as well as evolving into Haunter. This left me needing only 350 points to get to the Coronet Highlands, which meant that one more day of playing Legends Arceus would be all that I need. I started the day by forgetting to record that I evolved Haunter into Gengar and completing its Pokédex page, but in doing so I finally had enough points to reach Star Rank 4. Eventually we get to Coronet Highlands, and after meeting with Ingo along the way and given access to Sneasler, I was then freely able to travel to where Probopass was, and there it stood. Or floated. I knew that preparation was the key factor here, so I took some cakes with me and crafted some smoke bombs and leaden balls. I also knew I was too low a level to even engage in battle. I got as close as I could, and it was finally caught. After almost 21 hours playing, I am finally done with Legends Arceus. Just as before, I made lists of all the potential Pokemon that can acquire each mark. For the fishing mark, you acquire it on a Pokemon you catch while fishing, which has a 1 in 25 chance. The fishing mark was surprisingly one of the smallest lists, having only 15, so we started with that one first. Basculin can be found as soon as you enter into the wild area, but it's only catchable that early in the game in one particular spot in North Lake, Mylock, at 2%, which isn't great, but the next best option is in Hulbury, which has a 10% chance of appearing. Next, we roll for the Curry mark, which has a possible 47 Pokemon. The upside to hunting for Pokemon in this manner is that the Curry mark is guaranteed on any Pokemon that can appear, but the odds that a Pokemon can visit our camp is based on the quality of the curry we make, ranging from 1% to 25%. Poniard is available in one location via making curries in the Motostoke outskirts. For the dry mark, you acquire it by catching a Pokemon when the weather has intense sun, and this has a 1 in 50 chance. Sandygast only appears in Loop Lagoon, which is in the DLC. Like in Scarlet Violet, if we start a new game, we can access the DLC areas quite early in the game's progression. I was feeling quite confident about catching these three as they all appear quite common and quite early in the game, so I wouldn't be spending too much time in this game. Right? Right. For the 3 Pokemon we needed to catch, none of these are version exclusives, nor are they more likely to appear in one game or the other, so it didn't matter which game we started with, so I went with Sword. We begin our game and do some hand holding through the story, and eventually we get to pick a starter. At first, I thought that it probably didn't matter which one I picked, and I had no real preference out of any of the 3, but after doing some research, I came up with a plan. Basculin has a catch rate of 25, which is very difficult, so I wanted to give myself a good enough chance to catch them. I learned that out of the 3 starters, the Grookey line is the only one that can learn False Swipe via TM, and it can be found in the Western Pokemon Center in Motostoke, making this the optimal choice. After doing some more story stuff and eventually getting to the wild area, I took on some Dynamax raids to get some XP candy and fed it to Grookey, which then evolved into Thwackey. I also made sure to stock up on as many berries as I'll need them for making curries later, and as soon as I was able to, I navigated my way to the Isle of Armor so I can check on the weather on Loop Lagoon daily. I personally haven't played the DLC, so I was relieved to discover that I didn't have to progress too far to get the Pokemon I needed. After doing some more story progress, including beating the first gym leader and making it all the way to Hulbury, I was prepared to start hunting for Basculin. After only a few caught, we got the Basculin with the fishing mark. As the odds were 1 in 25, I felt that getting the mark so soon was really lucky. I continued on with the story, taking on the second gym and making it back around to Motostoke outskirts where we need to be for making curries. Since I got access to explore the DLC, I checked almost daily for when the weather had intense sun in the Loop Lagoon. I am aware there is a method where you can change the weather to be whatever you want by changing the date to the first of a certain month for a particular weather, but I wanted to avoid doing any kind of manipulation to that extent. It was only a few days of checking that I saw the weather, and the time that I checked this was about 11 PM at night, so I had about an hour to get set up to record and catch a bunch of sandcastles, and after 20 Sandygast caught, we eventually got it. To get the dry mark, a 1 in 50 shot after 20 catches wasn't too bad either, and I was very happy with this. The last mark that I needed for Pokemon Sword was probably the most tedious of the lot, this being the curry mark. Essentially, whenever you set up camp, there is a chance that a random Pokemon will join you after making a curry. This is determined by a number of factors such as where you set up camp, how good your curry was, and the relationship your party Pokemon have with each other. This is called sociability. And in order to increase the sociability score, the only way to do it is to make curries. The more you make, the higher that number gets. And if it gets to a specific number, Pokemon then have a chance to appear. I had a bunch of curries at this stage, and eventually Pokemon were showing up to the camp. After only the second Pokemon joining our camp from making curries, we ended up getting the Poniard we needed, meaning that I was finished with this challenge. But how did I do? Overall, my playtime in Sword was just over 9 hours, Legends Arceus was 21 hours, Scarlet was over 110 hours, and we got 7 shiny Pokemon. However, given that there were times in playing Scarlet that mass outbreaks didn't go in my favour, I had reset the game, meaning I've played the game longer than what my profile has said. And considering I played through Scarlet on the Switch 1 once before the Switch 2 was even announced, and given how Scarlet and Violet had issues with the frame rate and performance, the playtime is actually going to be a lot longer than that. I didn't keep track exactly how long I spent doing this challenge, not just the playing and recording, but the preparation beforehand and the editing now. Altogether, I would say I've spent at least 200 plus hours on this project, which has actually been over a year in the making. What started as a fun idea and quickly gained momentum became quite difficult towards the end, and in between times there were real life issues going on that impacted how much time I could dedicate to it. But was it fun? Yeah. Was it worth it? I guess so. Would I recommend it? No. There were a lot of times of playing where I thought there was no way I was going to reach the end, just because you're praying to the RNG gods for good things to go your way. But having now completed the challenge, I would definitely do some things more differently, like prioritizing what Pokemon to catch first. I started this challenge in September 2024, and since then I've also learned a lot more about the games I've played and researched, but I'm glad that it's finished and can look forward to the next challenge I do, which will likely be in Legends ZA. If there's a specific challenge you'd like me to do for that game when that comes out, or any other previous game, please let me know in the comments and I'll consider all the options. For now though, let me know what your favourite part was. The only issue I have now though is what to do with all these marked Pokemon. If you did enjoy this video and you made it all the way to the end, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.